Hi there, everybody. This is Mr. Skursky here, and hope that you're doing well. This week, we're going to be talking about religion in ancient Greece, and so we're going to talk about the Greek gods and goddesses. Really, what we're trying to focus on today is how did religion and mythology, how did it shape life for people in ancient Greece? How does it impact their day-to-day decisions? We're going to talk about a little bit some of the gods, what they represented, and sort of the role they played in Greek life. So first and foremost, let's talk about the religion itself. Like most of the cultures that we have talked about, the Greeks are polytheistic. They have lots of gods. Um, Again, this is the belief in more than one god. This should not be a new term for most of us, but just as a reminder, polytheism, the belief in more than one god. They believe that the Olympian gods were very, very real and that they could and did intervene in the lives of mortals. Oftentimes, there are myths where you have a god taking the form of a mortal in disguise and testing humans in certain ways. They get involved in the conflicts of humans. If you read the Iliad or the Odyssey, the gods intervene on the behalf of mortals all the time. They could even marry and have children with mortals. Hercules is one example. Also, the warriors Achilles and Perseus in other Greek myths are part god, part human, known as demigods. Before we can get to the gods, though, we have to talk about their parents, Uranus and Gaia. Uranus was the sky and the heavens, Gaia was the earth, and they gave birth to the Titans. The Titans were a group of beings before the gods as we know them. There are a total of, I believe, 12 Titans, but the two we're going to focus on are Kronos and Rhea. Kronos is the strongest of the Titans. He is the head honcho. He rules the universe. Rhea is his sister and sister and wife. Kronos had a really bad habit, though, in that what he would do, there was a prophecy that one day his children would overthrow him, become more powerful than him, and he would no longer be in power. He did not like this, and so he had this really bad habit of eating his children as soon as they were born. Rhea, being, not thrilled that all of her children are being eaten by her brother slash husband, she hid one of the children away. That child was Zeus. We'll get back to Zeus in a second. So when Zeus was born, she hid him away, and she instead presented to Kronos a large boulder wrapped up in the swaddling clothes of a babe, which Kronos then swallowed whole. Zeus eventually grows up. He fights against Kronos and does, in fact, overthrow him with the help of some other creatures, the Cyclopses, for one, and a group of beings known as the Hundred Handers. Eventually, once this happens and all of Zeus's siblings are freed, we see the family kind of get together here. All the first Olympians are the children of Rhea and Kronos. Again, Kronos feared that one day they'd overthrow him, so he ate them, hides Zeus away. He eats a stone. Zeus overthrows him and frees the siblings, literally cuts them out of Kronos' stomach. So let's talk about the gods themselves in terms of where they lived, what they did, how they were viewed. The Greeks believed that the gods lived on top of Mount Olympus, which is in northern Greece. The Olympic Games were held and named after Mount Olympus in honor of the gods and Zeus in particular. The gods were viewed as immortal. They could not die, they could not be killed. And part of the reason that they were immortal was because they ate a substance known as ambrosia and drank a substance known as nectar. This helped to keep the gods immortal. They also had the power to both help and hinder mortals. They, again, interacted with people regularly. according to Greek myth. And so, because of this belief that they were very real, because of the mythology showing that they interacted with people, ancient Greeks took their religion very, very seriously. It was a very fundamental part of day-to-day life. I often give the example that in ancient Greece, people didn't think that a thunderstorm happened because there was some sort of electrical discharge in the atmosphere. They thought that Zeus was throwing thunderbolts at someone, and they very much believed that. So let's talk about each of the gods one by one, sort of break it down here, and start with Zeus. Zeus is sort of the king of the gods, lord of the heavens. He is, of the original 6 Olympians, he is actually the little brother. He is the youngest of them. But being the one that overthrew Cronus and having the power of the thunderbolt that he does, he is the most powerful. He is possibly the worst husband ever. He has something over 100 children. Ares and Hephaestus, 2 other gods, are his children. In some myths, Aphrodite as well. Hermes, another god that we'll talk about today. Heracles or Hercules, Perseus, etc. Over 100 children. When I say over 100 children, not all of these are with his wife Hera. In fact, 98% of them aren't. We're not going to go over this entire list here, but just to give you an idea, very, very quickly, just looking at the amount of names, we can see that Zeus is he's kind of the worst husband ever, right? Not much more to say about that. Let's switch gears and talk about his brother, though, Hades. One of my favorite gods. He kind of gets a bad rap, and he doesn't quite deserve it. Hades is, again, he is Zeus's brother, and he is the lord of the underworld. We often think of this as like a heaven and hell sort of situation. That is not the case in ancient Greece. When you die, you go to the underworld, period. End of story. There's no heaven, there's no hell, there's just the underworld. And so the underworld, yes, it is sort of a dark and gloomy place because it is underground in a cave, not because it is a place of torment and punishment for wicked evildoers. And so because of this, Hades is often misunderstood. He is not an evil god. He is simply the caretaker of the dead. It is his duty to make sure that the dead stay where they're supposed to be so we don't get ghosts running around causing chaos and all of that good stuff. I know Disney kind of made him into a villain in the Disney Hercules, if you've seen that. But again, not actually an evil guy. One of the favorite things I like about Hades is actually his dog. The underworld was guarded by his 3-headed dog, Cerberus. Now, Cerberus is possibly the best name for a dog in ancient Greece, and it's really, really funny. The root word for Cerberus means spotted. Guys, he named his dog Spot. Not making that up. Moving on. Poseidon, the 3rd brother, god of the sea. Also, again, brother Zeus, lord of the ocean, the sea. One of my favorite stories about Poseidon is actually a contest between Poseidon and Athena in the city of Athens. The Athenians, they can't decide who do they want to name their city after, who do they want to be their patron god, and so they both are given the task of, give us a gift and we'll see whose gift is better. If we like your gift better, we are then going to name our city after you and you'll be our patron god. Poseidon, he makes this big grand fountain that is shooting seawater everywhere, and he's like, ooh, look at this, it's awesome. Athena produces an olive tree. The nice thing about olive trees is that they produce olives and they produce wood and they're useful. A fountain full of seawater, you can't drink it. Yeah, it looks pretty. It's not a great gift. Hence, Athens is named after Athena. Athena wins this fight. He's also kind of partly responsible for the myth of Medusa. Um, there are a couple different versions of this story, some involving Apollo, some involving Poseidon. Basically, Medusa was this very, very beautiful, beautiful woman who Poseidon slash Apollo thought was very, very attractive and wanted to get to know better. Um, Rejecting them, uh, they didn't take it too well, and so they cursed her to become this ugly, hideous monster. I've heard this tale both with Poseidon being the person rejected, with Apollo being the person rejected, um, but either way, he is responsible for it in some capacity. Next, our first goddess we'll talk about is Hera. Hera is the wife of Zeus and also his sister. Now, I know that this sounds weird that the gods are marrying their sisters, but honestly, when you're one of 12 people at the beginning of creation, the dating pool is a little limited, right? You got to work with what you got. She's the goddess of women, goddess of marriage, represents these things, would protect over women during childbirth, things like that. And she's often depicted as being bitter and holding grudges. She does not like the fact that her husband is a terrible husband and that he is off having affairs with all these other goddesses and mortal women. And so she, in a lot of myths, goes to extreme lengths to cause these other women a lot of hardship and grief, and also any of the children that are born of these relationships. Um, she is a very, very good wife in the fact that she never leaves Zeus, and like she really is always very faithful to him, even though she has every reason to leave him. Um, but she is viewed as sort of the ideal of a Greek wife, even if Zeus is the opposite of a good husband. She's the mother of Hephaestus and Ares, two more gods we will talk about here in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about another set of goddesses, Demeter and Persephone. Demeter and Persephone are going to be very, very important goddesses in terms of the belief in sort of the changing of the seasons and the well-being of agriculture in Greece. Demeter is Zeus's sister and also one of his girlfriends. She is the goddess of the harvest. She is the one who makes the plants grow. She is the one who is responsible for the harvest and the production of agriculture. Her daughter, Persephone, is also the daughter of Zeus. She is a goddess of vegetation, of plant life, of growth as well. And she also holds the title of Queen of the Underworld. She ends up married to Hades. Now, the whole myth of Hades and Persephone is a really, really interesting one. It has been retold in a lot of different ways over the years. But the long and short of it is that Hades sees Persephone out in a meadow somewhere picking flowers and is absolutely bewitched by her beauty. He goes to Demeter and says, Demeter, your daughter is beautiful. May I have your permission to court her, to try and date her and woo her and marry her? Demeter wants no part of this. She absolutely shuts down Hades and rejects him and says, no, you cannot marry my daughter. But Hades, not to be outdone, while Persephone is out picking flowers in that meadow another day, he basically kidnaps her. He puts a hole in the ground, she falls into it, and she falls into the underworld. While she is down there, he offers her food to eat, and specifically pomegranate seeds. Pomegranate seeds in Greek mythology were like the food of the dead, and the fact that she was eating them in the underworld made it so that she could not leave the underworld. So he sort of tricks her into being trapped in the underworld until she agrees to marry him, which she does. Now, back to Demeter. She is not happy that her daughter has been kidnapped by Hades, and she goes into a great depression and sadness and sorrow. And while she is sad and depressed, nothing is growing. It is a time where all the plants begin to die and wither, and all the people are starving, and this is a problem. Because the gods can realize if there are no people to worship us, we have a situation on our hands. We need to get things growing again. And so it is negotiated that for 6 months of each year, Persephone will be allowed to return to the world up above and be with her mother Demeter. This is where she can be happy that she's with her daughter. And the other half of the year, she'll be down with Hades in the underworld. And this is the Greek explanation for where the changing of the seasons come from. In the spring and the summer, Persephone is up on Olympus, and in the fall and winter is her time where she is down with Hades. It's important to note that while, yes, Hades does sort of kidnap and trick Persephone into becoming his wife, he is a very, very good husband to her, and in time, she grows to love him very earnestly, and there are versions of this myth where she actively is sad to be leaving the underworld and leaving her husband. Next, we'll talk about Hestia, one of the sort of overlooked Greek goddesses. She is actually a really, really important Greek goddess in terms of a sort of unique tradition in ancient Greece. I'll get to in a second. She is one of Zeus's sisters as well. She is the goddess of the hearth and of hospitality. It was her duty to make sure that the fire was burning on top of Mount Olympus so that it was always a warm, inviting, welcoming place to come home to for the other gods. She actually, in terms of hospitality, she gives up her seat on Mount Olympus to another god named Dionysus, who we'll talk about in a bit. But the thing that I like most about Hestia is that she will often go and she will test mortals. She would dress as a poor beggar or something like that, and she would come to people's houses and like knock on the door and there's a storm. I'm a traveler on the road. Is it okay if I stay here tonight? And if she was denied hospitality, she would then punish those mortals. This myth and the belief around it led to something that is known as xenia, or guest right. Basically, if you were a traveler in ancient Greece, you could expect that if you went to someone's home and said, "Hi, I need a place to stay for the night, can you please put me up?" that they would make a concerted effort to try to put you up. This doesn't mean they're going to put you in the grand presidential suite in the master bedroom. It might mean yeah, you can sleep in the barn, or we can throw some blankets on the couch, sort of thing, right? But that they would take you in and offer you shelter. This also meant, though, that if you were granted hospitality, you were not to abuse that hospitality. If you went into someone's home being granted guest right, and then you stole from them, or you caused harm or did violence to them, you would be punished severely by the gods. And so this was actually a really interesting sort of popular belief and practice in ancient Greece. She also is a goddess who she does not have any boyfriends, husbands, no partners. She remains celibate. One of my favorite gods as well, Ares. He is a war god. He's the son of Zeus and Hera. He embodies all of the physical, violent, destructive aspects of war. He's god of war, of combat, of violence, of martial skill. His chariot was pulled by two lesser beings known as Phobos and Deimos. Literally fear and terror. Wherever Ares went, Fear and terror led him there. A battlefield in the ancient world is not a very, safe place. It is a scary place, and so that was represented there. Um, he's actually best known for any of his fighting, but he's actually best known for his love affair with Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. That's important because Aphrodite is married to someone else, namely Ares' brother Hephaestus, my favorite god of all the gods, Hephaestus. Now, he is also the son of Zeus and Hera, brother to Ares. He is the god of smithing, the god of fire, of metalworking, of crafting and creation. He is married to Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and pleasure. It's worth noting that Hephaestus is really the only one of the Greek gods who is depicted as ugly. He actually gets in an argument with Zeus at one point, and Zeus hurls him off Mount Olympus. Now, he can't die being an immortal god, but that doesn't mean he can't be hurt. And, being thrown off a mountain does a number on you. And so he walks with a limp. He has physical injuries and deformations from falling off Olympus, being tossed off Olympus. He eventually makes it back up to the top of Olympus, where Zeus, feels really bad about this whole thing, and so, let me make it up to you. What do you want? And Hephaestus says, well, I'd like to have a beautiful wife, and then the whole Aphrodite marrying him. Now, Aphrodite, being the goddess of beauty, she is not thrilled with being married to Hephaestus, probably why she has an affair with his brother Ares. I mean, if you have to choose between the big burly blacksmith here or the fit, strong, athletic soldier, you can kind of understand her thinking there. But what I like about Hephaestus is because, unlike the other gods, he is not perfect. He is imperfect, but he compensates us. He crafts the most incredible and beautiful things. During the Iliad, during the Trojan War, the warrior Achilles, his armor is damaged, and so his mother goes to Hephaestus and says, hey, can you build some armor for my son? Hephaestus says, sure. And it basically gives him superpowers. Hephaestus he's a cool dude, in my opinion. One of my favorite gods, also because I'm a theater teacher, is Dionysus. Son of Zeus and a mortal woman named Semele. He is the god of theater. He is the god of celebrations. He is the god of wine and ritual madness. I don't know what ritual madness is, but he's the god of it. But he is the patron god of theater. The big theater festival in Athens that was held every year, it was a week-long festival, was known as the Dionysia. It was a party specifically for Dionysus. He's the party hard god. He's basically, if there's going to be a good time had somewhere, Dionysus is going to be there. He does not start out as a full-fledged god. He starts out as a demigod. And when we talked earlier about Hestia, when she gives up her seat on Olympus for him, this allows him to become a fully fledged god. Very unique, very interesting story. Athena. Athena is another great Greek deity, goddess, another goddess of warfare, daughter of Zeus. Note I haven't said who her mother is. The story around Athena's birth is kind of interesting. She popped out of his head. Let me explain. There was this minor goddess, I believe her name was Metis, and she is having this conversation with Zeus about, oh, Zeus, you think you're all high and mighty, you think you can do whatever you want. And Zeus says, yeah, I can. She says, but you can't give birth. At which point he kind of looks at her and says, watch this. He then swallows her whole. It's a little rude. But a while later, he starts to get this splitting headache. And he goes to Hephaestus and says, Hephaestus, yeah, I need you to do me a favor. Sure, what do you mean? I need you to hit me with your hammer in the head as hard as you can. Now keep in mind, Hephaestus has already been thrown off Olympus by Zeus once. He doesn't want that to happen again. And so he's like, no, I don't think I'm going to hit you in the head with a hammer. And Zeus said, no, no, I'm begging you. Like, my head is pounding. Just, like, hit it. Just, please. You promise you're not going to throw me off the mountain? Yeah, I promise. I'm not going to throw you off the mountain. Just hit me in the head with the hammer. All right. Bam! Hits Zeus in the head. At which point, out pops Athena. The reason he had a headache was because he had a goddess, like, growing in his skull. So apparently he can give birth. He can do anything. She's a goddess of bravery, of wisdom, military tactics, and skill. She is sort of the thinking parts of warfare, more than the physical combat parts of warfare. But she is definitely a warrior. She is the patron goddess of the city of Athens, and all around one of the more famous and familiar Greek deities. She is also notably a virgin. She does not have any boyfriends, any husbands. She is chaste. And so she's often associated with purity as well. Next are the brother and sister combo of Apollo and Artemis. They are twins, the children of Zeus and the moon goddess Leto. Apollo is the sun god. That is his role. He's also associated with music. You often see him playing the lyre, which is sort of like the harp-like instrument we see in his hand here. It was believed that he carried the sun across the sky in his chariot. His sister Artemis was the huntress, the goddess of the hunt, often depicted with a bow and arrow, with hunting hounds, and sort of a protector of the wild and wild lands. We next have Hermes, the messenger god, also a son of Zeus. There's a pattern here. When I say the messenger, I mean he literally would fly around between gods, deliver messages. He is in charge of so many things. He's the god of travelers, of herdsmen. He's the god of sports and athletics, inventions, trade. The rod he's holding in his hand here, the caduceus, is a symbol for medicine. If you can think of it, Hermes kind of has a hand in it. He's also the person who would guide souls to the underworld and pass them off to Hades. He does it all. I always joke that he is the intern of the gods, except that he's a full-fledged god, but he's always being sent to do various jobs and tasks for the other gods constantly. Lastly, Aphrodite. Now, the goddess of beauty, love, pleasure, procreation. It's very, very hard to find a picture of Aphrodite where she's wearing any clothes, because she does represent physical beauty. So I went with a very famous Renaissance painting, The Birth of Venus, by a man named Botticelli. She's married to Hephaestus. She's not thrilled about this, and she often has an affair with Hephaestus' brother Ares. What's really, really interesting about Aphrodite, more than the fact that she is not a great wife to her husband, is how she is born. Notably, Zeus is not her dad. Yay! She actually, according to some stories, predates Zeus. Was born before Zeus is around. When Kronos, the Titan, overthrows Ouranos, there's a battle. He cuts Ouranos up into pieces and throws the pieces into the sea. As soon as the pieces hit the sea, it begins to boil and foam and roil over, and out of the sea foam pops Aphrodite. The biology doesn't make sense to me either, but that is what the myth is. There's a lot of ways in which the Greek gods and their lives impact day-to-day life. If you are wanting certain things to happen, you might pray to certain gods. If you wanted to look into the future, you could ask certain gods that were associated with prophecy. There was a woman who lived in a place called Delphi, known as the Oracle of Delphi. She was a priestess to the god Apollo. The idea of Apollo being able to see the future was a big thing. So I want to take a second, and you can sort of pause the video here in a couple seconds. If you were an ancient Greek and you wanted one of these things, who might you pray to? So if you want a child, or to survive a battle, if you want to fall in love, if you want to defeat your enemies with skill and bravery, if you want to travel from point A to point B safely, get there safely, or if you want a good harvest, who might you pray to? I'll give you a little bit of wait time, and then we'll check and see if you got it right. For the child, did you say the goddess of, mothers and motherhood and women? Like that? Or maybe the goddess of procreation, Aphrodite, so Hera or Aphrodite. You want to survive a battle? Ares or Hera is probably a good bet. Maybe Athena. To fall in love, Aphrodite. That's sort of her jam. If you want to defeat your enemies, I think, again, Athena or Ares, probably a good choice. You want to travel somewhere safely? I would personally go with the god of travelers, Hermes. If I want a good harvest, I would look up the phone number for Demeter or Persephone, the goddesses of the harvest or of vegetation. This is not a complete list of the Greek gods. These are the 12 Olympians. There are a lot more in ancient Greece, and there are a lot more ways in which the religion affected the day-to-day lives of ancient Greeks. But this is sort of a primer, a dipping our toes into it for the first time. In this folder, you'll find a couple other videos and some other documents I'll upload that have more materials on Greek religion and sort of its role in day-to-day life. And if you have other questions about this, feel free to reach out to me or any of your social studies teachers on Schoology, and we'd be happy to direct you to more resources. Anyway, I hope that you found this enlightening and entertaining, and hope that it is going to be able to serve as a good resource for you.